Good morning, 8th grade. Mr. Franklin here. Second to last day of learning. Today is May 27th, 2020. Today we're going to be talking about Malcolm X and his different perspective that he added to the civil rights movement. Up until this time, we've been talking primarily about Martin Luther King Jr., leader of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, which was started in Nashville, Tennessee as a part of the sit-ins. And today we're going to be talking about Malcolm X and black nationalism. So hang in there, hold tight, and let's get to our presentation for today. All right, so we're going to characterize Malcolm X as offering a different perspective to the civil rights movement. Here's a quote from Malcolm X. There's nothing in our book, the Quran, which teaches us to suffer peacefully. Our religion teaches us to be intelligent, be peaceful, be courteous, obey the law, respect everyone, but if someone puts his hand on you, send him to the cemetery. That's a good religion. So I want you to reflect for a second. How does that differ from the life and teaching of MLK? That's right. MLK would say that nonviolence is the solution. Malcolm X. Now, I want to be clear. One thing about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., if we want to sort of compare and contrast them, we wouldn't say Malcolm X promoted violence per se. He did say use violence in self-defense. So he didn't say just go up and start shooting, killing people. But he did say if somebody puts his hand on you, you send him to the cemetery. So that is a different perspective than MLK. And that's why someone very famous said, you either deal with Malcolm X, you either deal with MLK, or you have brother Malcolm over here to deal with. So you either accept this change that's going to come through nonviolent, peaceful means, white people, or you have to deal with somebody like Malcolm X. So who was Malcolm X? So he was a troubled youth. When he was young, he was involved in crime. Let's talk about what happened. When he was young, his father was murdered by the KKK. His mother went insane, and because of this, and was put in an insane asylum for her own safety and protection. And because of that, he grew up very troubled as a youth. He was involved in crime. He was involved in robbery, theft, selling drugs. He essentially was a pimp for prostitutes. When he was in prison, he learned about the teachings of someone named Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad was the founder of the Nation of Islam, sometimes referred to as the Black Muslims. Malcolm X became a devout follower of Islam and changed his life. He turned away from a life of crime, turned away from a life of drugs and alcohol and partying, and became a serious student of the religion of Islam. And immediately when he left, he joined the Nation of Islam. Now, because he was such an eloquent speaker, he was such a great writer and a speaker, he became the spokesperson for the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X did. Malcolm X advocated the use of militant resistance in order to achieve freedom. Militant resistance meaning we're not just going to listen to anything that you say. We're going to fight stridently, militantly for our rights. If you approach us in a violent way, we're going to resist that with violence. He believed in a concept called black nationalism, which we're going to talk about in a second. And he offered an alternative to Martin Luther King Jr. So he was a different route to get the same rights. So both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. did want respect and freedom and power and equality for African American people in the United States. But Malcolm X, he advocated a separation of the races. He didn't promote integration. He promoted separation. Blacks need power and authority, but they need to be separate from whites. We don't even want to be around whites. And that was really the root of black nationalism. Black nationalism is a political ideology that people of African descent should be unified. They should be separate from white people. African Americans do not need the help of whites, and resources of the black community should be collectivized. So black people helping black people. And there's still threads of black nationalism in the United States. It's not a bad thing, not a negative thing. You see like black-owned business, right? The idea is that if you're African American or of African descent, you should support other black businesses, other black people. So again, black nationalism is the idea that African Americans should be united, blacks and whites should be separated, and blacks do not need whites in order to gain or achieve power. So it is different than the viewpoint of MLK. MLK would say, his famous "I Had a Dream" speech, he focused on how blacks and whites would live peacefully together, whereas black nationalism means giving black people power but living separate than whites. So that's the difference between Malcolm and Martin. It's the idea of inclusion versus separation, violence versus nonviolence, Christianity, Islam. MLK was more of an insider, Malcolm was more of an outsider, and of course, integration and segregation. So MLK would have promoted integration, where Malcolm would have promoted segregation. Last thing we're going to talk about is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So John Lewis, who was famous for being one of the founders of SNCC, SNCC, was replaced by Stokely Carmichael, this guy right here, very militant African-American leader who didn't believe in nonviolence. SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, changed their name to the Student National Coordinating Committee. So you notice when Stokely Carmichael took over, they changed their name and took out the nonviolent part and changed it to national. And this sort of symbolizes the second generation of civil rights leaders, led by people like Stokely Carmichael, are going to really be more militant. They're going to identify more with Malcolm X and less with MLK. They're going to see nonviolence as a tactic and not a philosophy, not a way of life like MLK and John Lewis and other leaders did. So, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee became more militant, changed their name to Student National Coordinating Committee, and sort of appropriated the beliefs of Malcolm X. All right, guys, so that is your presentation for today. You're going to watch your presentation, answer questions. I have some vocabulary work for you to do. Again, today is your second to last day of instruction. Friday is your homeroom time, so make sure you're ready for that on Friday. And then next Friday will be your virtual promotion ceremony. So we're wrapping it up done. Make sure you get 100% of your work done. We don't want anybody in summer school this year. Love you guys. Stay focused. Stay safe. And that's it.